While Michael Jackson and his brothers were preoccupied with the victory tour, trouble was brewing at home too. Much to everyone's dismay, Janet, who turned 18 on May 16th, 1984, had become involved with a young singer named James DeBarg. James is from a large singing family from Grand Rapids, Michigan, in the same DeBarg that had been the Jacksons' stable mates at Motown. And he and Janet seem to have common ground, at least superficially. Since both were from show business families, Joseph and Catherine disapproved of the relationship, saying that James was combative and unpredictable. Plus, in their view, Janet was young and inexperienced. James would later insist, though, that he and Janet were first intimate when she was 15, and he added somewhat indirectly that was some real love marking. When the Jackson parents finally figured out that James was abusing drugs, it was the end of their daughter's little romance as far as they were concerned. However, Janet told them that she was in love with him and determined to marry him despite, or perhaps even because of, their disapproval. She was aware that he had a drug problem, she said, but she thought she could handle it and maybe even be of assistance. He always said he could change people, she said in retrospect. And I knew that he so badly wanted to change. He was trying to, but he wasn't trying hard enough. They eloped on September 7th, 1984, in Grand Rapids, the Barg's hometown. Their wedding night was a disaster, as James recalled that I spoiled it completely. Janet had been shaking in her shoes at the wedding ceremony, and I thought the least I could do was to give her a night to remember. I booked the top suite of the Ame Plaza Hotel, which cost me a small fortune, but then I went out and got rotten drunk with some friends. I finally got back to the hotel at 3 a.m., and Jenna was waiting for me crying. The next day, Jenna telephoned Latoya to tell her the news of her marriage. Latoya was then charged with breaking the startling news to Joseph and Catherine, who predictably did not take it well. She also telephoned each brother except Michael. They were all upset and angry, Jimmy in particular. I knew that he would have killed her if he could have gotten his hands on Janet, Lachelle will remember. The question then was to how to tell Michael. Actually, no member of the family wanted to be the one to do it. It was as if they felt they would somehow be forever tainted in his eyes by letting the person must remember for having passed on such awful news. Michael always felt protective of Janet. He used to say that she was his best friend in the family, like a twin, literally. The news was more, to be sure, to be upsetting, and the victory was difficult for him without having to deal with such domestic turmoil. So no one wanted to be the one. Finally, Quincy Jones's daughter, a friend of the family's, called Michael to tell him she didn't have anything to lose. As expected, he was filled with anxiety by the news. It killed me to see her go off and get married, Michael would say later. I didn't know how to handle it. For a month, Janet and James lived at Havenhurst with Janet's family, much to James's dismay. He wanted them to have their own place, explained his mother, Erin. He felt that they needed to be alone to give themselves a chance to grow in their marriage. However, Janet didn't want to leave that house. She was still like a little girl who never wanted to leave her bedroom. James DeBarg would come to the house completely out of his mind on drugs. Steve Hell remembered. He'll be so high on coke and alcohol that on two occasions the guards tried to stop him from going inside Havenhurst. If you do, Mr. Jackson will kill you, they warned him, speaking to Joseph. However, He was belligerent and didn't care. The funny thing is that when he wasn't high, James was the nicest guy in the world. He was like Dr. Jekyll and Mr. DeBerg, his father. You leave my husband alone, Janet was heard screaming at Joseph on several occasions. He's not good for you, Janet, Joseph shot back. And if you think you're going to ruin this family by staying married to this guy, you can't forget it. Catherine tried to find a reasonable solution to the problem. She offered to enroll James in a rehabilitation program. He refused to go. In an interview, James the Berber Mayor remembered the Encino house as the House of Fears and painted an eerie picture of Michael, who was at home for a short time in the middle of the tour schedule. It was while I lived there that I came to realize what a sad lonely figure he is, James said. He was like a ghost, wandering around the place looking for friendship. He would come to our room late at night, tap softly on the door, and say, "Is it right if I come in?" One time, Jen and I were making love, and he came right on in. We got into he got into bed with us and poured his heart out. He said, "I envy you too because you have each other and love each other, but I haven't got anyone." There was never a sign of a woman in his life ever. He really was a very lonely man child, James Bard really recalled of his brother-in-law Michael. The only time he had any fun was when he had friends over to play in his $2 million amusement arcade, but they had to let Michael win most of the time. If they didn't, they wouldn't be asked to come back. James was has a litany of amazing memories about his life in the House of Fears. He recalls the day it rained and Michael danced naked around the pool. His mother screamed from the house, "Put your clothes on, Michael, your father will be home soon." Fear of Joseph was what controlled them all, James said. Of course, James was on drugs, so who knows how reliable his memory was at the time. After a few months, James and Janet moved into their own condominium at 12546 The Vista in Brentwood. To move out of the house because Joseph was going to kill James, recalled Steve Howell. "I'm serious." James had out with Joseph a number of times, confirmed his mother Erin. Their enemies, they detested each other. Jenna wanted nothing to do with her family as long as they could not accept her husband. Actually, Janet had begun distancing herself a couple of years earlier when she started working as an actress on the TV show Fame. "My parents were very strict while I was growing up," she once told me. "It was really our music and our work. We missed out on our childhood. Well, you know what really goes on there." It was bad because once you step out there for the first time, it stuns you. A lot of things I've never seen before. In a short time, Jenna was miserable in her new marriage. She had wanted her independence and she got it, but at what cost? Now she found herself staying up nights worrying about James, who was rarely at home. According to Jerome Howard, Joseph and Catherine's former business manager, Jenna would get phone calls in the middle of the night from James's friends telling her where he was, which was usually out in the ghetto about 25 miles from Messina, buying or doing drugs. Janet, who never been there in her lifetime, would get up and drive out to the ghetto to find him. In time, she got to know the ghetto better than any other Jackson. She loved him and would do anything for him. But the entire Jackson family opposed to the marriage. Each member took turns trying to persuade Janet to end up with James. The problem the problems the new lads were having in their marriage, especially The drugs went against everything Michael stood for personally and spiritually. Besides, he would see that what the marriage had done to his sister emotionally. At one point, she collapsed and had to be rushed to a hospital. She was exhausted physically and emotionally. Michael was the only person to whom he would now listen. He begged her to leave James, crying on the phone with her from different stops. Along the victory tour, Janet was finally convinced. God, I felt like my whole life was falling down, and I could see him, James, going down. But there was nothing I could do, Janet said. And he said to me, well, you haven't tried to help me. But I thought, what about helping yourself? I thought, well, I can either go down with him, and that's the end of my life, or I can let go and continue on alone. Janet left James on January 7th, 1985, and immediately filed for a petition to nullify her marriage and restore her former name, Janet Domindia Jackson. On the petition, she listed her total gross monthly income as just $3,000, a minuscule amount considering the millions she would earn later. She said the amount of her husband's income was unknown to her. When she got home from the courthouse, she called her friend Renee Elizondo and said, God, I can't believe what I just done. The annulment was finally granted on November 18th, 1985, but then Jenna was back at Havenhurst. James claims that Jenna terminated a pregnancy while he was married to her. I don't think she told many family members, he said, but her mother knew. I wouldn't have minded a child, but it had to be Jenna's decision. I think her career, her plans, her family had a lot to do with it. We went to a clinic in Los Angeles, but we had to go in and out the back door because we were so well known. It was real scary. Afterward, I took her home and held her in my arms and told her everything would be okay. For years, Jenna was dealt with the rumor that she actually did have the baby she was carrying at the time, and that this child is secretly being raised in Europe. Jenna denies it. Of course, she spent almost 10 years denying that she was married to Renee Elizondo when the entire time she actually was. It was only when he filed for divorce that the truth came out. What surprised anyone that if Janet Jackson one day reveals that she and James DeBark had a child so many years ago, that rather than having an abortion, she thought it would better if he or she was raised away from the limelight.